Audio Jungle.
How do you see the participation of people of different professions in this process? Not everyone was an electronics or electric engineer or systems analyst, which came later and so on. Fred, for instance, our friend here at CGI.br, is a chemical engineer, is nothing, and has made spectacular contributions to the development of several aspects of the internet.
You're absolutely right that not only do we have people who have come into the arena years ago from different areas, but we have many, many, many more people participating, and they come from a much wider variety of places. There's no question that the internet has become important. It's become important economically, it's become important socially and politically. The economic importance means that there's a lot of money involved. And with money comes the usual economic forces, investors and builders of products and marketing and so forth, where the focus is on the money as opposed to the pure technology. Nothing wrong with that, that's the normal way of things, but it means that you have many people whose orientation and whose background and training is on the business side of things, as opposed to purely on the technology side of things. Now, these things are not completely separated. You have technical people who learn something about business. You have business people who actually know something about the technology. They're not necessarily all that distinct. And not only do you have business people who are trying to make money or figure out what the right investment is, but then you have another aspect that is people who try to analyze these systems. And so that brings in the world of economists, either because they're trying to understand it academically or because from a regulatory or government point of view they want to understand. But is no longer just isolated technology. This is a system that has to be looked at as a large-scale social science activity, not just as a purely technical activity. Even the behavior, here's a good example. How do you build a system that is going to be resilient? And then you get forces like a DDoS attack, a distributed denial of service attack, in which tons of traffic, lots and lots of traffic is focused on one site, and it causes a jam, and then that site goes down. Now that may be because somebody is deliberately trying to do it, or it could be for unintended reasons. Victoria's Secret unveiled its new line of lingerie over the network, and they got more traffic than they could handle, and all of a sudden it brought their portion of the network down. So you have to look at these things from a different perspective. And then, of course, you have the political side. There's a really good guy that you guys probably know next door in Uruguay, Diego.
Oh, yes.
And I had a very nice talk with him a couple of years ago. And I liked the way that he phrased it. He said, the internet has become important, and therefore governments have to be concerned. It's about power, and there's no way to escape it. He was not, he's just trying to be objective about these things. So now we're into a totally different space, and I can tell you in the world that I'm partially living in, that on the one hand we worry about what's correct technically, what works and so forth, and then we watch how the politicians behave, and they're not uneducated, but they also are dealing in an entirely different space with different interests that they balance off, and their answers of how they choose to make decisions come out sometimes quite different from the kind of things that we would choose to do.
I will take advantage of what you said about the governance and so, and make a provocative question. What do you think about the actual way to access the governance issue as a whole thing? Because I think maybe it'd be wiser to access governance in a leveled way. As an example, I used the control of port 25 for spam. Spam is a big problem, of course, in any part of the world, but with a simple technical measure, you can alleviate the problem. Of course, not solve, but alleviate. If you see this problem with eyes of a lawyer or people from policy or people from the repressive environment, they will try to catch the guy, or maybe they will try to make a new law. Then we are mixing things that maybe are making the governance much more difficult issue. What do you think about to try to separate these in levels, each level with a main actor on that?
So I like what you're saying, actually, and I think there's actually two things that you're saying. The broad principle of not trying to lump everything into one basket. I talked about our attitude in designing protocols to design them in minimal pieces and that you could use to build on, and you solve the pieces you can and you leave room for the other things. So rather than have one massive governance framework that all governance issues have to go through, build governance structures that address the relevant problems and let them evolve over time. So that's one thing. The other thing that you said was, I think, also very important. There may be more than one way to approach a particular problem. So with respect to spam, there will be people who come at it as a law enforcement problem, but you can also, as you said, come at it as a technical problem. And in many cases, there will be technical solutions that are far easier and far more efficient and far more effective than coming at it from a law enforcement point of view. So it's important to bring together the just exactly along the lines that you were talking about, people from different backgrounds, even to work on the same problem, so that you get different possibilities. Some things will work better than other things. Certainly for spam and for copyright infringement and for things like that, if I gather a set of lawyers in the room, they will think about legal solutions. And if you try to lay out that there may be a technical solution, it's outside of their space.
I was reading the book by Janet Abates.
Yes.
And she says that your group at the time, 69, 70, in the network working,
Yep.
the division was from that beginning, that very beginning, that to work collaboratively, producing open information, open standards, etc. And of course, interoperability was the main objective. And did you have that? Could imagine at that time that first this thing would grow in the way it grew and expand the way it expanded, diversify the way it diversified, and basically preserve that same collective spirit of collaboration?
Interesting question, because there are two elements in what you said. Mm-hmm. How much of the expansion did we understand? Mm-hmm. And the other is how much of the openness and collaborative framework did we expect would persist? Mm-hmm. With respect to the expansion, it was pretty clear very early that this was going to be a success, in the sense that everybody who had a computer would want it to be connected. And everybody who bought a computer in the future would want it to be connected. And it would only take a certain amount of time before we got to that point. And it was clear, you have the so-called network effect, in that the value of a network increases as more people are connected to it. And the value of the network for each person who's already on the network increases as more people get on the network. Mm-hmm. So we could feel that, because it changed our lives even as we were doing it. The set of people that we were interacting with, people who were friends, if we made a relationship, whether it's professional or personal, with somebody, if they were on the network, then they were accessible to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They send a message and we get a reply. If I met somebody who lived 2 blocks away, but they weren't on the network, oh my goodness, what a pain. When are we going to get together? Well, I don't know. It's, get our schedules synchronized and so forth. But truly, I when I moved to Washington to work for ARPA, I'd go into a meeting with somebody and we'd agree that we have to talk. And even though we were in the same town, if he wasn't on the network, it would be months before I get back to him. Whereas I go around the world and I talk to somebody, if they're on the network, well, then we're continuously connected. So we could see that. Mm-hmm. And no question about that. And then there was the pressure of multiple countries and different technologies and different agencies, all of which are going to build networks. So you got to get these networks all connected. And we could see this was going to explode. Mm-hmm. Now, it took still a few decades for it to explode, but it's
Yeah.
but it's still an explosion. Now, the openness and the collaboration is a much more sensitive and different question. And I don't think there's been enough discussion of that, frankly. I don't know that everybody could speak to it. So I'll just give you, I haven't thought a lot about it, but I'll give you my quick reaction. Because of the way the Arpanet came about with one agency funding things, it greatly reduced, nearly eliminated competition. There was not a cutthroat, I've invented this and I want the credit for this, a little bit of that for publication purposes. But the hallmark of success when you had an idea was to get other people to use it. So you design a protocol and its success is that it gets used by others and people implement it and so forth. So the stage was set and played out with a great deal of cooperation and collaboration to start with. Speaking for myself, I didn't think about it. It was there, it was the way we did things, and I didn't worry about a change might come. Now, various other people I know did worry about things like that, and we did see on occasion, but it just wasn't a key part of my mindset. You know, and anytime we did see somebody being proprietary and wanting to get control, we just kind of raised our eyebrows and, you know, ignored them and went on about our business in a way. But it's a very good question that you asked, and one that should be asked of many other people. I'm not sure that I can give you as insightful an answer as others might.
We have almost 30 years of stability in the protocols. We have local protocols like Ethernet that's doing very well until gigabits per second. And we have the TCP/IP also doing excellently in the wide range. But of course, we see the academic world struggling with alternatives, maybe open flow, maybe software-defined networks. I personally do not believe very much in these things in the near future, but of course the things will change in the future. What's your view of that need to have a new proposal for basic structures?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I'll give you my particular point of view.
Yes.
There have actually been quite a few changes in the basic protocols over time.
Yes.
They have been incremental and they have been compatible.
Yes.
So you have TCP fast start, you have content delivery networks that are caching things, you have any number of very sophisticated changes that have taken place, but they have not position themselves as this is an incompatible, new, distinct network that you have to throw the whole thing out. But nonetheless, the changes are big. They're not just small, little, tiny changes. They're very ones that have made substantial difference in the operation of the network. With the protocols that were running 30 years ago, if you limit ourselves to those protocols today, the network would not be working very well. So I think the rhetoric, the statements about we've got to throw things out, we've got to have a new thing, are somewhat at odds with what the real possibilities are to make very substantial changes and to do it incrementally and to bring them in and have them gradually supplant the old ways and maintain that continuity and still get the benefits of new things. So I'm not sufficiently up to date on where OpenFlow is versus other things, but I'd be surprised if you couldn't bring those ideas into operation in a way that is a smooth, compatible change as opposed to a dramatic, sort of break the network in order to fix it kind of thing.
Evolution, not revolution.
Yeah. Now, there are things, that every once in a while something comes along that just won't work in the current base and you build a new thing, but that's okay. Even though the great thing about the network is that the amount of stuff that is forced on you is very, very little. You can send an individual packet that does not an IP. Well, it has to be an IP packet. It doesn't have to be a TCP packet. It could be a UDP packet, or it could be something else. And it's only a question of whether or not the other guy understands it. But the genius of the IP design is that it is intended to have almost nothing in it. It's intended to be as little as possible rather than as much as possible. The question about principles, I think, is very important, because the principles are important, and it's important to articulate, explain, and educate people about these principles. It's not just sufficient to have a list of principles written down, but it's important that a large number of people understand and agree with and subscribe to these principles. So education about the principles is absolutely central. You can have all the principles you want. If they're only yours, it doesn't matter. I mean, and so forth. And CGI is an absolute jewel. You guys have done an amazing job of organizing within the country and getting people from all the major sectors, government, industry, academia, and really built a solid framework for Brazil. It's a leading example anywhere in the world. I mean, I think others need to learn from it. And the challenge for CGI, for Brazil, is to continue that, to make that part of everyone's education. So principles have to be simple, they have to be understandable, they have to be meaningful, they have to apply. It doesn't, if you have a complicated principle that doesn't apply to a practical situation, it's not going to do any good. So the principles are important, and not only are they important in their own right, but you have to socialize them and embed them, and people have to understand that.
Audio Jungle.